T11.10. Researchers want to evaluate the effect of a natural product on reducing blood pressure. They plan to carry out a randomized experiment to compare the mean reduction in blood pressure of a treatment, which is the natural product group, and a placebo group. Okay. They will use the data to perform a test of null hypothesis mu t minus mu p equals 0 versus the alternative mu t minus mu p greater than 0. So I would interpret this as, okay, so mu t is the true mean reduction in blood pressure when taking the natural product, and mu p is the true mean reduction in blood pressure when taking the placebo. So this means that the reduction is the same. And this would be equivalent to saying that the reduction is greater for the natural product. Okay. The researchers would like to detect whether the natural product reduces blood pressure by at least 7 points more or average, okay? Whether it reduces by 7 points, at least 7 points more, at least 7 points more on average than the placebo. If groups of size 50 are used in the experiment, a two-sample t-test using alpha 0.01 will have a power of 80% to detect a 7-point difference in mean blood pressure reduction. If the researchers want to be able to detect a 5-point difference instead, then the power of the test... Okay, so a 7-point difference is pretty big compared to no difference at all, right? No difference at all would be a 0-point difference, right? And then a 5-point difference would be smaller, okay? So I'm thinking that it's easier to detect a bigger difference than it is a smaller difference. Right, it's like easy to detect when someone's telling a big lie than when they're telling a small lie, right? So that's the reasoning I'm using here. So a 7-point difference should be easier to detect than a 5-point difference. Okay, so the power of the test would be smaller for 5 points. So I would assume the answer is A. Right. Yeah. All right, so let's kind of think of this with an image. Okay, so the null hypothesis would be no difference, right? So here's what the sampling distribution would be for the null hypothesis, no difference, okay? The sampling distribution, assuming the alternative hypothesis, a 7-point difference, so let's like place 7 here. Why don't I just do this? Duplicate. Right, so that's the sampling distribution for a 7-point difference, okay? Now, the power of the test, right, if alpha is 1%, then we would only reject, let me rewind a little bit. Right, we would only reject if we got, shoot, sorry. All right, let's try that again. We would only reject if we got a result that was in the top 1%, right? So this is the boundary value for rejecting, right? And then if we got a value that was not in the top 1%, then we would fail to reject, okay? So this boundary value is pretty important. Okay, now let's duplicate this curve and let's move it over. I don't know, it's right here, right? And let's say that this is boop, centered at 7. Okay, so so now the power of the test would be represented as this area right here, right? The power is the ability to reject the null hypothesis when an alternative is true, right? So this curve right here represents an alternative being true, and then everything on this side of that boundary line represents rejecting the null hypothesis. So this would be the power right there. Okay. Now, if, okay, let's see how I can copy this. Let's just copy the whole thing. Almost erase the whole thing. Oh. Okay. Duplicate. All right, let's move it down here. All right, and then I do want to erase some things. Okay, so now let's say that instead of looking for a 7-point difference, we're now only looking for a 5-point difference. Okay, so 5 would be over here and 7 is there. Okay, so that means that this distribution would shift over there, right? So now it's centered at 5. Okay, and then the power of the test is now this region here. Right, again, it's this second curve represents some alternative value being true. In this case, the alternative value is 5. And the power is the ability to reject the null hypothesis when the alternative is true. So this region right here. Okay, so notice how this region is smaller than this one, right? So when 5 is the difference we're looking for, we have a lower power. If 7 is the difference we're looking for, we're going to have a greater power. Okay, so that was a long explanation to say that a smaller difference would result in less power.